The introduction, the day the world held its breath. Cinematic background music, soft drums, waves crashing, faint whispers of soldiers praying. Narration, June 6, 1944. The world stood on the edge of a knife. As dawn broke over the cold waters of the English Channel, thousands of ships, gray shadows on a restless sea, moved toward the coast of France. Their mission was clear, yet almost impossible: to storm the beaches of Normandy, to fight through the fire of German guns, and to free a continent held captive by tyranny. This was D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in human history, an operation so vast, so daring, that its success would change the course of World War II, and perhaps the fate of the modern world. But behind this miracle lay years of planning, sacrifice, deception, and courage. And at the heart of it all stood America, a nation that rose from the ashes of Pearl Harbor, united by one purpose: to strike back and to turn the tide of war. Soft pause, music swells. This is the story of how the United States led the greatest invasion in history, how young soldiers crossed an ocean to face death itself, and how, on one fateful day, they changed the destiny of freedom forever. Part 2, the background, Europe in chains. By 1940, Europe had fallen silent under the boots of Nazi Germany. France was conquered. Britain stood alone, scarred but unbroken, its cities bombed night after night. And across the Atlantic, America watched, knowing that soon it too would be drawn into the flames. Then came December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and America entered the war. In a matter of months, U.S. factories thundered to life. Detroit became the arsenal of democracy. Ships, tanks, and planes rolled out faster than the enemy could destroy them. While American soldiers fought island to island in the Pacific, another plan began to take shape in the West, a plan that would strike at Hitler's empire itself. This was Operation Overlord, the code name for the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. But the stakes were unimaginable. If D-Day failed, it could mean another generation of war. If it succeeded, it would open the gates to victory. Part 3, the planning and secrecy. Cinematic tone, maps, generals, candlelight rooms, ticking clocks. Planning D-Day was like constructing a miracle. For nearly 2 years, American, British, and Canadian leaders met in secret, crafting the single, most complex military operation in history. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme commander of Allied forces, carried the burden of success or failure on his shoulders. Every decision mattered. Every wave, tide, and gust of wind could decide life or death for thousands. The Allies used deception on an epic scale. They built fake tanks, false radio signals, and even a phantom army led by General George S. Patton, tricking the Germans into believing the invasion would come at Calais, not Normandy. American engineers developed new landing craft. Pilots studied aerial maps until they could draw the beaches from memory. And in the quiet fields of England, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, most barely 20 years old, waited for the word that would change their lives forever. Invasion begins, dawn over Normandy. Soundscape, thunderous waves, distant explosions, murmurs of prayer. Narration, June 6, 1944, 03:30 a.m. Over 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, and nearly 156,000 soldiers begin to move across the English Channel. A silent armada, stretching from horizon to horizon, America's might sailing toward the most fortified coastline in the world. As the first light broke, the storm clouds cleared to reveal the beaches of Normandy, codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The Americans were assigned the westernmost beaches, Utah and Omaha. General Omar Bradley's men would lead the assault. Their mission, to breach Hitler's Atlantic Wall, a network of bunkers, mines, and machine guns built to make the coast impregnable. Pause, the music slows, voice turns solemn. But there is no wall strong enough to stop the human spirit. At 6:30 a.m., the first landing crafts hit the shores. Bullets ripped through the air. Shells exploded in the water. Entire boats vanished in plumes of smoke. The sea turned red. Men leapt from their crafts, dragging each other through waves and gunfire. Many never made it past the surf. Those who did faced the impossible. Omaha Beach, the bloodiest shore. Sound, gunfire, chaos, shouts, waves. Omaha Beach, it would become a name carved in blood and bravery. Here, the American 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions faced the full fury of German resistance. Machine guns from the cliffs tore through the first waves. The air was thick with smoke, screams, and salt. Communications broke down. Boats missed their landing zones. Entire units were wiped out before they could fire a single shot. For hours, the soldiers were pinned down, trapped on open sand with nowhere to hide. Yet, amid the chaos, acts of heroism shone like stars through the storm. A young engineer used his body to block a German machine gun nest. A medic dragged men to safety under fire, patching wounds with shaking hands. Officers shouted through the noise, "Move! Keep moving forward!" By midday, a miracle began to unfold. Small groups of soldiers started scaling the cliffs, throwing grenades into bunkers, and silencing one gun after another. By evening, Omaha Beach, once hell on earth, belonged to the Allies. The cost was unimaginable. Over 2,400 American casualties in a single day. But through their sacrifice, the door to Europe had been kicked open. Heroes and sacrifices, the price of freedom. Soft piano, distant wind, emotional tone. For the young Americans who landed that day, D-Day was not about glory. It was about duty, brotherhood, and courage beyond fear. They came from farms, factories, and small towns across America. Some had never seen the ocean before they crossed it to fight for freedom. They carried letters from loved ones, photographs folded in pockets, prayers whispered under helmets. Many never returned home, but their bravery became the foundation upon which the free world was rebuilt. One soldier wrote in his diary the night before the invasion, "We're not heroes. We're just ordinary men who have to do extraordinary things." And that's exactly what they did. Each life lost on D-Day was a thread in the great fabric of liberty, woven with blood, courage, and sacrifice. As night fell on June 6th, over 10,000 Allied soldiers were dead or wounded, but the beaches of Normandy were secure. The miracle had begun. The turning point, the road to victory. Music swells, faster tempo, hope and triumph rising. D-Day was more than just a victory. It was the turning of the tide. Within days, over 1 million Allied troops had landed in France. They pushed inland, liberating towns one by one, while the German army struggled to regroup. The success of the invasion forced Hitler into panic. His once invincible war machine was now on the defensive. The Allies had gained what they desperately needed, a foothold in Europe. From Normandy, they advanced through the hedgerows of France, liberated Paris in August 1944, and drove onward toward Germany. Every mile won was paid for in American blood, but each step brought the world closer to freedom. The courage shown on D-Day inspired the entire Allied campaign. It proved that tyranny could be defeated, not by strength alone, but by unity, will, and sacrifice. The aftermath, America's defining moment. Slow, proud orchestral theme, reflection and reverence. By spring 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing. American and British forces marched from the west. The Soviet army advanced from the east, and in April, Hitler's empire finally fell. But it was on those beaches of Normandy that the end had truly begun. For the United States, D-Day was more than a military triumph. It was a testament to what America stood for. It was the moment when ordinary citizens became the saviors of civilization. From the steel factories of Ohio to the farms of Kansas, from the deserts of Arizona to the skyscrapers of New York, a nation united to restore freedom to a broken world. The miracle of D-Day was not luck. It was courage. It was sacrifice. It was faith that right would triumph over wrong, no matter the cost. Pause, music fades, and as the sun set over Normandy, the world knew that freedom had found its defenders, that tyranny had met its match, and that America had turned the tide of World War II. The world reacts. Shock and awe. Soundscape, radio crackles, news headlines echo, bells ringing. Narration. As news of D-Day spread around the world, the airwaves erupted with hope. In London, crowds gathered in Trafalgar Square, listening to the BBC announce, "The invasion of Western Europe has begun." In the factories of Detroit, workers stopped their machines and cheered. In New York, church bells rang through the streets. And across occupied Europe, in France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, resistance fighters wept with joy. For the first time in years, there was proof that liberation was coming. American leadership had done what many thought impossible. They had crossed the sea, faced the fury of the Nazi war machine, and won. Hitler, upon hearing of the landings, was stunned. His generals begged for reinforcements, but confusion and pride paralyzed German command. By the time they realized the truth, that Normandy was the real invasion, it was too late. The tide of history had turned. The hidden heroes, beyond the beaches. Soft piano and strings, calm but emotional tone. The victory on D-Day was not just the work of soldiers on the beaches. It was the result of countless hidden heroes. Behind the scenes there were the airborne paratroopers, who jumped into darkness hours before the invasion, landing in enemy territory to secure bridges and roads. Many were lost before they even touched the ground, their parachutes glowing targets in the moonlight. There were the engineers who built the artificial Mulberry harbors, massive floating docks that allowed ships to unload supplies directly onto the beaches. There were the codebreakers, who spent sleepless nights in secret rooms deciphering German messages. And there were the nurses and medics, who turned blood-soaked tents into lifelines for the wounded. Each of them played a part in the miracle. Without them, the invasion would have failed. Voice softens. Behind every victory, there are thousands of untold stories of bravery, pain, and selfless love for country and mankind. The human cost, freedom's heavy price. Somber, haunting tone, slow strings, echo of waves. Victory has a price, and for D-Day, that price was written in blood. Over 10,000 Allied casualties, including 2,500 Americans, fell on the beaches of Normandy. For every flag raised, there were mothers who never saw their sons return. For every cheer of victory, there was a silence left in homes across America. At the Normandy American Cemetery, white marble crosses and stars of David stretch as far as the eye can see, each marking a name, a story, a sacrifice. When President Eisenhower visited years later, he stood among those graves and said, "These men gave their lives in exchange for a free world. It is our duty to ensure their sacrifice was not in vain." Voice steady but emotional. And that is the legacy of D-Day. That freedom is not given. It is earned, defended, and passed from one generation to the next. The legacy. When courage became destiny. Music builds to a powerful cinematic crescendo. D-Day was not just the beginning of the end of World War II. It was the rebirth of hope. It showed the world that courage, unity, and sacrifice could defeat the darkest evil. The beaches of Normandy remain sacred ground. Every year, veterans and families gather there, standing where freedom began again. They touch the sand, listen to the wind, and remember those who never left. For America, D-Day became a symbol of what the nation stands for, the defense of liberty. No matter the distance or the cost, it was proof that when tyranny rises, the spirit of freedom will always answer the call. Soft fade, final line delivered with reverence. So when we remember June 6, 1944, let us not just remember a battle. Let us remember the courage that shaped the world we live in. The day when America turned the tide of war and gave humanity a second chance at peace. Cinematic fade out. Music, slow orchestral swell, ocean waves, seagulls, echoing gunfire fading into silence. Narrator's closing words. They were young. They were brave. They came not for conquest but for freedom. And because of them, the world was saved.